Jesse Owens, Young Record Breaker by M. Eboch, Chapters 12 and 13. Chapter 12, Racism Everywhere. America wasn't the only country suffering from racism. Across the ocean, something was happening that threatened Jesse's Olympic dream. Back in 1932, the International Olympic Committee agreed to hold the 1936 Games in Germany. In 1933, Germany's Nazi Party had taken power under Adolf Hitler. Hitler thought that Northern European whites were better than other races. He said the ideal people were tall, blonde, blue-eyed Aryans. "Have you been keeping up with the situation in Germany?" Dave asked Jesse one day. Jesse shrugged. He didn't have much interest in politics. "I've heard that Hitler is up to some nasty stuff, but no one seems to know what's really going on. It's probably just a lot of talk." Dave spread out a newspaper. "This says they've been taking rights away from Jewish people. Some people think that Hitler wants to wipe out all the Jews." "Nah." Jesse looked over Dave's shoulder. "No way he could do that, could he? And why would he want to anyway?" "I don't know, but there's more. The Germans don't want to compete against black athletes. They're saying that we should be kept out of the Olympics." "They wouldn't do that." "The International Olympic Committee is threatening to take the Olympics somewhere else if Hitler doesn't change his tune. I wonder if they really would, with the Olympics so close." Jesse shook his head. "Gee, Dave, when did we get caught up in this kind of thing? I just want to run." Dave grinned at him. "We've always been caught up in race issues. You just have that amazing ability to forget about the bad things that happened to you." Jesse smiled back. "I guess so, but what good does it do to hold a grudge? I'd rather think about tomorrow than yesterday." "Well, you better keep a close eye on tomorrow. We might not get to the Olympics at all if Hitler has his way." Every day, Dave got a newspaper and read aloud the updates on the Olympics. Finally, Hitler agreed that all people would be welcome. "But listen to this fellow," Dave said. "He says the Games will prove his theories. His team of Aryan athletes will show that they're better than everyone else." "Do you think they could do it?" Jesse asked. "I haven't heard of a lot of great German athletes." "He's keeping them secret. At least that's the rumor." Dave ran a hand over his head. "And there's more. Some people are still saying that America shouldn't go. They say we should boycott the Olympics. That would send a message to Hitler that Americans don't agree with his ideas." Jesse sat up on his bed. "Who wants the boycott?" Dave glanced down at the paper. "The Amateur Athletic Union says we should boycott. The International Olympic Committee and the American Olympic Committee don't want to boycott. They say politics should stay out of sports." "Well, I think it should too. But if things are as bad as they say, I just don't know." David looked up at his friend. "And no matter what happens, you'll be in the middle of it. You're one of America's stars right now. If you get behind the boycott, that side will think it's won. If you go, the other athletes will think it's all right to go, especially the white athletes. If black athletes are willing to compete in Germany, why shouldn't they?" Jesse leaned forward and put his head in his hands. "I've been training for this Olympics for years. I want to go more than anything, but I want to do what's right." Dave stood up and paced the room. "I wish there were a clear answer. Even our black newspapers can't agree. A lot of black Americans could make it to the Olympics. Some say we should go and prove ourselves that way. Others say we should stay home and protest." Jesse looked up. "Let's go see what Coach thinks." They found Larry Snyder over at the track and discussed the problem. Snyder put an arm around each of them. "I understand that you want to make a point in Germany, but look, America is racist too. Sometimes you fellows can't compete in important meets here. Why should you give up your best chance of success to protest Germany when things aren't much better at home?" "That's a good point, Coach," Jesse said, "but maybe I should be doing more to make a difference. Today, you are sitting on top of the world, but if you boycott the Olympics, you'll be a forgotten man." Snyder looked deep into his eyes. "Go to Germany, win, come home famous, and then you can make a difference." Jesse finally decided that if he made it to the finals, he would go. By competing in Germany, he could show the world that black athletes could be just as good as white ones. At the Olympic trial finals, Jesse won all three of his events, the 100-meter and 200-meter dashes, and the broad jump. His old rival, Ulysses Peacock, didn't put up much of a fight. Peacock had gained 10 pounds after an injury. Then he had torn his hamstring muscle during a meet. At the Olympic trials, he had his leg tightly taped. He ran courageously, but he just couldn't perform. "It's tough watching him," Jessie said. "He's trying so hard. He could have been the best." Larry Snyder patted Jessie on the back. "It's hard to see a great athlete fall, but it's partly his own fault. He didn't take care of himself. You're careful with your training, and that's why you don't get many injuries. Now just keep it up until we get to the Olympics." Dave Alberton qualified to compete in the high jump. Jessie's old rival and friend, Ralph Metcalf, also made the team. They were among the 19 African Americans to make the 1936 U.S. Olympic team. 10 of those were on the men's track team. 2 more were on the women's track team. The others were boxers or weightlifters. They would take on Hitler's Aryan athletes and see who came out on top. Many Americans looked forward to the battle. Jessie got pushed out in front. Newspapers around the world asked Hitler, "Who have you got to beat Jesse Owens?" Finally, Hitler answered. Dave found Jessie to share the news. "He's done it, Jess. Hitler gave a name." Jessie looked up from his books. "You mean the man who's supposed to beat me?" "Lutz Long. He's a broad jumper. The rumors say Hitler has lots of top athletes that he's keeping secret, but he named Lutz Long as the man who would beat you." Jessie thought about that and finally nodded. "We'll see, but I sure would like to take home 1 or 2 of those gold medals." Chapter 13, A Hero to All. On July 15, 1936, Jessie boarded the luxury ship SS Manhattan with 800 other passengers. Jessie was leaving America for the first time in his life. He would miss Ruth, whom he had married the previous summer, and their baby. He knew that Ruth, his parents, and all his siblings would be reading the newspapers to find out how he did, but he wouldn't even get to speak to them for weeks. Jessie stood at the rail as the ship left New York. The land got smaller and then vanished. He looked in every direction and saw only ocean. He would not see America again until his fate had been decided at the Olympics. Jessie turned away from the ship's rail. He thought about how far he had come and how hard he had worked to get there. So many things had changed. He owned only 1 suit, but it was a flashy pinstripe. His many stylish pants and shirts would earn him a joking vote of best dressed from his Olympic shipmates. Jessie only had $8 in his pocket, but the poor boy from Alabama would never wear rags again. People he had never met knew about him. He had found something he loved doing. It didn't matter if he was black or poor. He was somebody. The trip lasted more than a week. The athletes didn't have much to do. Some ate rich food and drank champagne. They gained a few pounds and got out of shape. One woman swimmer got kicked off the team for drinking. Jessie wasn't interested in these indulgences. He was seasick at first, and then came down with a cold. When he wasn't too sick, he exercised on the ship's deck to keep in shape. He was quiet and polite, knowing that the reporters on board would record his every move. He missed his parents, wife, and daughter. He also felt nervous about the Olympics. The world was watching him. People expected him to win and maybe even set new records. What if he failed? Jessie tried to hide his fear and loneliness. He didn't want to discourage his teammates. He was glad for his friends, Dave Alberton and Ralph Metcalf. Coach Larry Snyder was there too. He wasn't an official Olympic coach, so he paid his own way. He wanted to be there to help Jessie and see him win. As a veteran of the 1932 Olympics, Metcalf helped calm the younger athletes. "Those reporters will try to get you to talk about Hitler," Metcalf warned. "Don't take the bait. We're here to win gold medals for our country, for our schools, and for ourselves. Focus on that." Metcalf's words echoed what Coach Riley and Coach Schneider had taught Jessie. Put emotions aside and focus on the race. But now it was harder than ever. Jessie was competing in the top sporting event in the world. People expected a lot from him, and competing in Nazi Germany just made it worse. After the ship docked on July 24th, the athletes took an express train to Berlin. Jessie could hardly believe his eyes. The city had prepared well for the Olympics. It wanted to show the world how powerful Germany was. Banners with the Nazi swastika hung alongside the Olympic banners. Armed soldiers marched in the streets, keeping the crowds under control. Germany looked like a country ready for war. The athletes took a tour of the 9 sports arenas that would host the events. The largest, an enormous new stadium, could seat 110,000 people. Loudspeakers would blare news of the games for people who couldn't get tickets to watch. Their bus pulled into the stadium. Larry Snyder put a hand on Jessie's arm. "Jessie," he said, You might not get the welcome you're used to here. Remember, the Germans have been saying bad things about the American team. You mean they've been saying bad things about me because of the color of my skin? That too. You can't let it bother you. These are Germans, and they're going to support Germany. You can't expect them to like you. Don't let anything you hear from the stands upset you. Just ignore them and focus on your events. Jesse nodded. He tried so hard to be likable. It hurt when people hated him for no good reason. But he had faced racism before. He could handle it here. He had to. They arrived and stepped out on the track. Jesse tried to block out the whispers starting in the stands nearby. But then the chattering grew louder, and the crowd broke out into a chant. Yesa, Owens, Yesa, Owens. It took him a minute to understand the German accent. Then Jesse turned and stared. Was it possible? They were cheering for him? He smiled and waved. It was nice to know that he was famous even here. It was nicer to know that not all Germans hated him just because of his skin. Jesse kept smiling, and they finished the tour. The Germans had new ways to time the events. A high-speed camera helped judge the track and swimming races. An electric board showed the times. The Olympics, which was started in ancient Greece, was now a modern event. The American athletes spent a week training and getting used to being in Germany before the games began. They stayed in the Olympic Village, in a town a half-hour drive from the stadium, along with 6,000 athletes from 52 other countries. Women stayed in a large dorm, while the men lived in cottages of 24 people. Each cottage had a guide who spoke the team's language. Jesse and Dave roomed together. The rooms were comfortable and the food excellent. At the American cottages, they got American food. Jesse ate plenty of bacon and eggs, ham, steak, fruit, and juice. For the first time, Jesse saw a television set which broadcast the games. Television was a new thing, and the quality was poor. The athletes looked like they were floating in milk. The newsreels were better. Every night, the Olympic Village movie theater showed the athletes their wins and losses before the night's film. They could also go see music acts and fireworks, read in the library, and exercise in the swimming pool or on the practice fields. They could visit doctors, dentists, or barbers. They could get massages. Buses would take them to the right stadium for their events. The Olympic Village had everything an athlete might want or need. Jesse and Dave wandered around checking out all the things they could do. Did you ever dream such a place existed in the whole world? Jesse asked. Never. Dave thought for a minute. But then, it doesn't really exist. Not any place but here in the Olympic Village. People from every country, of every race, can get together as equals. We can eat together, work out together, even watch a movie together. But it's not like that in the rest of Germany. We wouldn't even be here if Hitler had his way. Jesse nodded. I'm still glad we came, if only to see this. If it's possible here, maybe someday it will be possible everywhere. Do you think so? We can hope so, anyway. Jesse had never even imagined such a world. Now he was a part of it. One of the most famous parts, too. He woke up to find people shoving autograph books through his open bedroom window. Jesse signed them politely until Coach Schneider came in and shooed them away. Dave picked up a note that had slipped under the door. He read it and laughed. Hey, Coach, look at this. It's a marriage proposal for Jesse. Schneider shook his head and smiled at Jesse. I can see you're popular here, despite everything. But don't start believing all the praise. You're too likable to let yourself be spoiled by the attention. But, Coach, Jesse said, what am I supposed to do? I can't just turn them away. I can. Now get dressed if you want to eat before we head to the stadium. They took the bus to the stadium for the first of Jesse's races. For each event, he had to compete several times. For the 100-meter dash, the runners were divided into 12 groups. Each group raced, and the best runners went on to the semifinals. Then the winners of the semifinals would go on to the final race. Schneider scanned the schedule. You don't have to run until the 12th heat, the last one. Great, Jesse said. I'll get to watch everyone else. For each race, he stayed on the sidelines and practiced his start as the gun went off. Then he watched the races, studying the style of the top runners. He liked knowing his competition. One of the best was Germany's Erich Borkmeyer. He looked more like a football player or bodybuilder than a sprinter. He won his heat in 10.7 seconds, and the German crowd cheered wildly. An American, Frank Wyckoff, won another heat in 10.6 seconds. Wyckoff had been the first man to run the 100-yard dash in 9.4 seconds. Jesse had tied his world record the year before. The 100-meter dash was slightly longer. The best time in any of the qualifying heats was 10.5 seconds from a Dutchman. Jesse wanted to beat that time in his qualifying round. At last, shortly before noon, Jesse stepped out onto the track. He used a trowel to dig small starting holes for his feet. The track was muddy from the drizzling rain. It wasn't the best surface for running or breaking records. Again, the Germans chanted, "Jesse Owens," and he took his place. But when the starter raised his gun, the crowd fell silent. The runners settled into their starting stances. The gun went off, and they sprang forward. Seconds later, it was all over. Jesse knew he had won and only waited to hear his time. It was 10.3 seconds, equal to the Olympic record. In the quarterfinals race that afternoon, Jesse did even better, winning in 10.2 seconds. The crowd roared and Jesse waved. People started murmuring about the new world record, but the officials disagreed. The runners had a wind at their backs, so the record wouldn't count. Reporters rushed up to Jesse. "How do you feel about the ruling? Didn't the Germans rob you of a new record?" Jesse just smiled. He knew they were trying to get him to say something bad about the Germans. All he would say was, It was a fair race. I'm happy with my time." "Hey, Jesse," one of the reporters said, "come over here and get a picture with Helen. She just got cheated out of a new world record, too." American Helen Stevens had finished her 100-meter trial race about 10 meters ahead of her competition. Her time of 11.4 seconds would have set a new world record for women. Once again, the official said that wind had aided the run, so the time wouldn't count. Jesse knew Helen slightly from the boat trip. He shook her hand, and they posed for photographs together. "Perfect," the reporter said. "I can see the headline, 'The World's Fastest Man and Woman.'" After lunch, Hitler arrived at the stadium. The crowd roared as loudly as they had for Jesse's win. Jesse looked up at the short man with dark hair and a tiny mustache. He didn't look anything like the Aryan Superman he bragged about. Still, Jesse felt a chill as he watched this powerful man raise an arm to the crowd. It was strange to think that Hitler hated him when they had never even met. Minutes later, a German athlete won first place in the shot put. Hitler cheered and danced like a regular fan. He invited the athlete up to his private box and shook his hand. Later, he met 2 German women and some Finnish athletes who won medals. But as the afternoon drew on, it looked like an African American would win the high jump. In the end, Jesse's friend, Dave Alberton, took the silver medal. Black athletes took the gold and bronze medal as well. Hitler quickly left the stadium before America's national anthem could be played. American papers roared their outrage at this snub of their athletes. Hitler had to promise the International Olympic Committee that he would not meet with any athletes, not even German winners. Jesse was too happy about his friend's win to worry about Hitler's slight. He and Dave celebrated that night. Jesse admired the silver medal. "Not bad. Now we'll just see if I can get something to wear around my neck." Jesse returned to the stadium on the second day of competition. He had to run the 100-meter dash 2 more times. He easily won his semifinal race. Then he bundled up in a sweatsuit and heavy blanket to stay warm. At 5 o'clock, he would race against 5 of the fastest men in the world. His friend Ralph Metcalf was one of them. Rain fell, making the track soggy. Jesse's lunch was soggy too. With all their preparations, the Germans had forgotten one thing. Athletes didn't have a place to eat in the stadium. They had to go back to the Olympic Village for lunch. But Jesse was in 3 events, each with several trials. He rarely had time to return to the Olympic Village. Instead, he and Larry Snyder brought along cold sandwiches. Snyder frowned at his own limp steak sandwich. "Sorry about the food, Jesse. It's not what I would feed an athlete before a big race." Jesse swallowed some milk and shrugged. "At least I'm eating, Coach. I've put up with worse." Snyder smiled. "Yes, you have, Jesse. I've never met a man with such a cheerful attitude about life. How do you do it?" Jesse thought for a minute. "Well, my mama always said that if you look hard enough for the devil will find you." He grinned. "I guess I try to ignore the devil so he can't find me." Snyder laughed. They finished their lunch, and Jesse did some stretching exercises. Finally, he lined up for the race. He glanced at his competitors as they dug their starting holes. Every one of them wanted to take home a gold medal, but only one would win. Jesse gazed down the muddy track. He had worked 8 years for this. 8 years, and it would be over in 10 seconds. One mistake could ruin those 8 years. Or this could be a dream come true. The crowd screamed out Jesse's name. They yelled for the German runner, Borkmeyer, too. They grew quiet when the men laid down their trowels and got in line. At the sound of the gun, the runners flew forward. Jesse drew ahead by the halfway point. In a few heartbeats, it was over. Jesse won by a meter. Ralph Metcalf took the silver medal, and Borkmeyer had to settle for the bronze. The officials announced his time, 10.3 seconds, tying the world and Olympic records. Jesse and Ralph hugged each other. In the stands, over 100,000 people stood and cheered. "Yesse, Owens! Yesse, Owens!" as Jesse jogged around the track in a victory lap. Jesse and Ralph walked together to the victory stand. Jesse took the highest platform. He bent while they put a medal around his neck and placed a laurel wreath on his head. Then someone handed him a tiny oak tree as a symbol of the growth of the Olympic Games. Jesse remembered working in the greenhouse and wishing that he might have an oak someday. He had never imagined getting it like this. Jesse straightened and stood calmly while the Star-Spangled Banner played and the American flag slowly rose. At least he was calm on the outside. Inside, he was fighting back tears of joy.